It has removed the competitive disadvantage that Indian exporters were under for some months. But even as you deepen the partnership with the US, you must diversify more. You must hedge more so that the US does not have coercive power over you. So first I'd say that it's good that an agreement has been worked out. An announcement has come regarding reducing the tariffs to 18% from what was 50% effectively. I think at one level it is important because it has removed the competitive disadvantage that Indian exporters were under for some months. If you recall, the tariff on Vietnam and Indonesia is about 20%. On Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka about 19%. So obviously exporters from India in some categories, gems and jewelry, textiles, leather, marine products, was having a disadvantage, and production was being impacted. Although overall Indian exports have gone up, even overall exports to the US went up, but in these sectors there was a hit, and something needed to be done about that. So that's one positive thing. The second thing is that there was a growing perception in India about the reliability of the US partnership. Since 2000, for nearly quarter century, there were efforts from both sides to deepen the partnership and build more trust in the relationship. With what President Trump has done, there was a sense that US was perhaps an unreliable, a coercive partner. To what extent should you continue deepening the partnership? To some extent, therefore, that negative perception may come down, although people will still argue that even if you need to deepen the partnership with the US, which you should, is the largest economy globally, the largest consumer market, in the lead in many sectors of technology, in many areas of interest to India. But even as you deepen the partnership with the US, you must diversify more. You must hedge more so that the US does not have coercive power over you. And the second argument will be that even as you do more defense partnership with the US, which is to your advantage, or defense technology partnership, do not be security dependent on the US. It can be argued, for example, countries like Japan, South Korea, or the countries in Europe agreed to major opening of the US market and huge commitments on investments in the US because they were security dependent on the US. And India is not in that position. So I think through the process as it has evolved, there will be an argument that little more caution related to the US. But again, India, I think, has able to assert that it will maintain the strategic autonomy of its decision making. It will stay with its stance when it needs to protect its interests, and India did not give in to the kind of pressures that the US was putting since July last year. If you noticed, even through the difficult phase in the relationship, when there were tensions on account of the differences on trade, both countries made a determined effort to stabilize other areas of cooperation between India and the US. All the other meetings continued, including defense-related meetings. Our defense minister met his US counterpart, I think in Malaysia in October, and signed a new defense framework cooperation agreement for the next 10 years. Whatever we wanted from the US in terms of defense purchases that were useful for us, those discussions continued. Defense policy dialogue continued, meeting of foreign secretaries continued. One of our cabinet ministers was in US last month for a discussion on critical mineral supply chains, and the foreign minister is there right now, external affairs minister there. So there was a very determined effort by both sides to keep the relationship stabilized, which shows that both value the relationship. So I think with this irritant somewhat out of the way, clearly the argument would be that since deepening of the partnership is in India's interest, because US still remains a leading economy, consumer economy, technology partner globally. Russia is very important for defense partnership, energy partnership. But in civilian economy, Russia doesn't have the strengths that Europe and US have. You have 5.4 million Indians living in the US, people of Indian origin. So you must deepen and put effort on that. So I think that will happen. But as I mentioned to you earlier, people will argue that, okay, deepen, but be more cautious. Diversify more, which is a valid argument. So I think it's a manufactured thorn. For example, US has a certain relationship with Pakistan. And Pakistan is a difficult country for India in terms of the support to terrorism. You've seen recently about Pakistanis having invested in the World Liberty Financial, and US talking about Pakistan in positive terms, referring to the Pakistan Chief of Defence Staff as his favorite field marshal. Now, India is not saying that we will not have a relationship with you if you don't have a negative relationship with Pakistan. So, US therefore cannot say that they will base their relationship with India dependent on India's other bilateral relationships. So that's kind of argument that certainly would not be acceptable. Furthermore, historically, Russia has been an important partner for India. It has given us political support at a time when we were under pressure from the West. It has given us from time to time technologies in defense which were not available elsewhere. And in any case, it doesn't make sense for India to put all its eggs in one basket. Because suppose the leadership of that basket suddenly becomes adversarial towards you, then what do you do, as Trump did in July? So India has to retain its other options. So whatever be the US position, my assessment based on how I've seen Indian foreign policy operate in the past is that India will be taking its decision based on its assessment of its own interests. And as far as Russian oil purchases are concerned, India will be looking at market conditions. Now there is going to be enhanced availability of Venezuelan oil in the market. If that is available at prices that are favorable for India, then India will take an overall decision. Because the whole argument was that India was buying more oil from Russia because Russian oil was available at discounted prices, and it made sense for India to buy it. And that was the basis. In fact, the purchases that India was doing from Russia were within the framework of US sanctions, because they had not said don't buy. They had said buy under a certain price cap. And US leaders in the previous administration were telling India to buy more Russian oil to keep the global market prices stabilized. So suddenly if a new president changes his position, doesn't mean that another country has to completely follow what he's saying. They have to look at their own interests. So I would think that market conditions could lead to changes in how much India is buying from Russia. But I don't think the way India takes a decision that India will reduce purchases from Russia to zero because President Trump is saying reduce it to zero. That's not how it operates.